The Global Education Summit, which held on 28th and 29th July in London, United Kingdom, was co-hosted by the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson and the Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta. It brought together heads of states and governments, as well as officials and youth leaders, to provide a platform for partners to chart a way forward towards transforming education systems through the exchange of best practices. The goal is to raise at least $5 billion towards supporting efforts at transforming global education system for learning outcomes fit for 21st century. President Buhari's attendance corroborates his commitment, promises and assurance to give more emphasis to education, including the allocation of more resources to the sector under his administration. The president lent his voice to the Raise Your Hand campaign on closing the financial gap on education, described as the heart of all national development efforts. He also committed to raising the budget for education by 50% over the next 2 years and up to 100% by the year 2025. And this is aimed at improving learning outcome in the country.
Some child somewhere may well be the one who goes on to develop the next vaccine to deal with cancer or whatever other problem afflicts humanity. Some kid around the world will, I have absolutely no doubt, have their lives transformed, and many, many kids will have their lives transformed by these funds.
Let us remember that even though money is necessary for transforming our education systems, it alone is not sufficient. A deliberate, committed drive towards ensuring that each dollar investment impacts quality and holistic education for our children is equally as vital.
Over 200 million. The size of the country itself is a major challenge for any administration.
Absolutely.
But luckily, people have realized that education is a starting point.
Yes.
Anybody who missed the opportunity of receiving education, he has missed everything. Hence, the fight for opportunities for education is very, very severe.
Deliberations at the summit includes the power of education transforming education for girls, financing for impacts and recovery, as well as priorities for transforming education. The president said Nigerians are completely aware of the priority of education, hence they are making necessary savings and inputs to make sure that children and wards get opportunities to quality education, while affirming that anybody who misses education misses everything. There are expectations that the president's commitment at the summit should be translated into political will and action for the critical situation of education in Nigeria. How fast can the take-homes from this summit be translated and implemented to improve the education sector? Also, how effective will the 50% increment of the education budget be? These are among issues guests on NTA's Good Morning Nigeria will be discussing now.
We have all our guests seated in our Abuja studio. First, let me introduce the Honorable Minister of State Education, Chukwuemeka Nwajiba. Good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning.
I would like to appreciate you for being here this morning. We learned you just arrived in Nigeria earlier this morning. Well, thank you indeed. We also have in the studio the Special Advisor to the President on Media and Publicity, Mr. Femi Additional. So you're welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good morning. All right. Also here with us in the studios is Professor Monzale Jibrin, who's the former Executive Secretary of the National Universities Commission. Prof, pleasure to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, let's begin by clarifying something, and I want Femi Additional to speak to this. When the president announced that he was going to London for this summit and also taking time off for his medical checkup, there were reports, in fact reactions, that the president was purporting to attend a summit that was intended to be virtual Was this a virtual summit or was it a physical summit?
Well, those who purported that didn't understand. The allegations were unfounded. The organizers had said that it was a hybrid summit, which means that some are going to be online and some are going to be there physically. And our president was among those required to be there physically. You saw that panel in which 5 African presidents sat. He was required to be there. He couldn't have done that online.
Thank you. All right.
All right.
Let me clarify that.
Yes. Let's now turn to the Honorable Minister of State. Let Nigerians really understand the concept of that summit and what it's all about.
Thank you very much, and good morning, Nigerians. The GPE is a global partnership for education. In other words, this is not limited to Nigeria. Globally, there are about 22 partners, 22 main donor countries, and then there are about 92 partner countries where we fall in. Now, what is the idea? For almost 20 years, the trajectory of education has been such that there are a lot of gaps in how different developing countries are challenged by it. So leaders thought, look, let us gather, make sure that, some of these countries get the right type of support they need. And this has been going on. This is nothing new. Nigeria only joined this partnership almost 10 years ago. But in that 10 years, they've not been able to make appreciable progress. We got the first tranche of what was given to Nigeria during the previous administration, and they tried to address some gaps in our education sector. Those gaps still exist. So we then did the next best thing, which is try to engage them formally and in a more holistic sense, with some sort of appreciation of what the problems are. So when this administration came in, Malam Adamu, then as Minister of Education, he immediately engaged GP and said, look, these are the things that we've had, and these are the problems we've got. You guys run an organization, we need to participate more. Which they all agreed. Nigeria is uniquely positioned, the biggest country, sub-Saharan Africa, in terms of human. So any number of persons that are not educated here will impact everywhere in the world. So they agreed. Nigeria then went on just a couple of months back to then apply to become part of the engagement process. And now Nigeria sits on the board of GP. Nigeria has become a director. In fact, the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Education will be representing Nigeria now on the board of GP as now reconstituted. So we then said the right thing would be to bring our president, who is much more respected by every other world leader around. Sometimes I don't even understand what Nigerians can't see, the value that he brings to the table. And we said, please, sir, if you do come to London and meet with these people, we will be in a better position to get a broader outlook, and which he did. So he decided to maybe take time and engage all of them. And we came away with almost $120 million in commitment out of this $4 billion that is going to be raised around the world. So we're a bit more lucky than many countries, but it's not just luck. It was because the president showed that kind of commitment to it. And that engagement is what we are looking for. So what do we want to do with this money? What we want to do with this money is, first, to address where we have the deepest gaps. Nigeria is a very unique country because on the one hand, you hear Nigerians talking about true federalism or non-true federalism or federalism. The truth of the matter is that we're a federation. And they want devolution of powers. You shouldn't participate in education. The federal government has no primary school in Nigeria. Owns none. All the primary schools, nearly 135,000 of them, are owned by state governments and owned by individuals because the education is on the concurrent legislative list. Therefore, there are too many gaps in the levels. Many people are way ahead. Many are so left behind. Then, but the government can't abandon its people. The fact that one state is not doing well, I often give an example of a state that did not employ teachers for 8 years. And another state, maybe Enugu State or Anambra State, is doing fantastically well. They win everything. I mean, so why are you running a country if you're just going to leave them without that? So this intervention, as soon as we get them, because now we're going to go into the actual allocations, into what they need to go teach at the development, trainings, it's no longer brick and mortar. We're going to actually make sure that there are outcomes for these monies that are putting together. The education is really at the core of all national development. And as long as we have some people who are not doing well and some others who are doing fantastically well, we're going to have these leakages and these gaps. So we need to appreciate as a country that we're going to develop together. We must bring everybody on board, because you never know where the next genius is going to come from, but you must give everybody an opportunity. And that is the responsibility of government. We understand that there are private individuals who may have all of this money, who want the best for their children and so on. But the biggest spender in education is public money. And it is only by giving people public access that they can actually become that crop that you choose them to be. And that's what this engagement is about. So this engagement is to put our leg into the global governance for education, global partnership. That partnership in turn helps check what Nigeria is doing. So you've heard the president now say, look, because you're welcoming us, and because we're doing this together, we're going to commit. We're going to commit that we're going to continuously increase our spending in education so that we can outstrip even the 20% requirement. Because the minimum threshold of 20%, Nigeria is almost willing to do that. But he has also committed to almost 50% in the next 2 years, meaning that we have to have a whole of government approach. We're no longer just going to say, because we gave UniBen 10 teachers or lecturers. That's not what Ministry of Education is actually a regulatory framework. We need to bring the whole of government to see what it is that we are spending. The federal government and all its subnationals must commit to how these monies are spent. And the president has given a commitment on behalf of the nation. I and all the people you see at the Federal Ministry of Education, Madamu, our professors and vice chancellors and everybody, are all going to be reviewing all of these. All the agencies of the parastatals, whether they are the UBEC, UNEC, everybody, we're all going to get together and make a speedier work of this work.
Can you clarify, Honorable Minister, the commitment made by the President of ramping up the budget for education by 50% or up to 50%? What exactly are we dealing with?
Okay. You need to appreciate what the President is trying to say. We are committing to, first of all, say we will bring a whole of government approach to education. And how do you do that? You get the National Assembly and all the other subnationals to say, look, this is how much we'll be spending. States, many have not considered getting to that level. So it's not like government is going to now transfer money to them. No. What government is going to do is there's a 2% of total federation account that is kept at UBEC. The laws in UBEC say the states must raise a counterpart funding for that. We must aggregate this sum into what we spent at the universal basic education level. We then must also, in addition to that, expand the national budget to then include the spendings that we are actually disbursing, which are not captured in our budget. For instance, State Fund, 2% of all company income profit in Nigeria is normally gathered and then disbursed to schools. Many of the spendings we do, whether they become spendings for lecturers to go and acquire higher knowledge, attend professional courses, people don't regard this as educational spending. Those are educational spending. But however, in addition to all of this, we're going to expand the amount of actual budgetary allocation from the federal legislature into the augmentation for all the universities, all our tertiary institutions. As you have seen, this government has expanded access by licensing more universities. We have also gone ahead to create more polytechnics, more federal colleges of education, and more universities. This in itself is almost doubling the amount of capacity that is available in the country in the last 6 years. So in that wise, total money coming into the system will then get to 50%. In fact, almost double it in the next 2 to 3 years.
You mentioned the fact that education is on the concurrent list, which is a fact. And that brings to mind how cooperative subnationals are going to be in this effort. Because you rightly pointed out the fact that some states are lagging behind with respect to education. Also, some states are not even prepared to up the ante in terms of promoting education. They may prefer other aspects of the development. And what are the assurances, that the subnationals are going to key into what the federal government is doing in this respect?
First of all, I want to commend the state governors. They've done fantastically well. The governor of Ekiti, the chairman of the Governors Forum, has more or less kept all the governors talking. And in the engagements we've had with them, all of them are willing. I've not seen one governor who is unwilling. They have all keyed in. You may have noticed that in the last 1 year, short of the period of COVID, I've been to practically all the states in Nigeria who are what we call basic education improvement, better education service delivery for all of them. And all of them got a $611 million facility which the federal government disbursed to these 13 states that are the weakest. And I've gone to almost all of them. It's only Taraba that I've not gone to. But all of them are running. Katsina, Zamfara, you've seen me see all of this and go to inspect actually what they have done in the written commitments they gave us. Because we have a written commitment for you to set up schools that draw out the out-of-school children that are not in schools. And almost on a continuous basis, at every one of these places. We launch them, we monitor them, you get the Ministry of Education people to go visit them, make sure that these children are not just roaming the streets for nothing. But even with all of that, we still have challenges. I agree with you. Some states may mean well, but they do not have the facilities to do that. So you would have heard that the Kaduna State governor and Sokoto State governor, all of them met, and they are talking about the new funding program, which is for results for engagement. Because if we want to reward you for the results, not just send money. We now want to see if you pull in, we then give. So there's a now result-based engagement. But also we also face the challenge of see the security situation in the country. Some of the gains we've made have been eroded by this insecurity that's created this environment. So, and you've heard that myself, we met with the Minister of Finance. She led it. She's a convening body for the Safe School Initiative, and we've agreed on some steps to call this. And the governors themselves have met and started a security audit of all their schools, so that they've actually shut down some schools which have boarding houses, but which they believe that because of the security situation may be prone to attacks. And then we want to continuously encourage those who can participate to then continue their education without losing the gains we were made. So I understand that there are those challenges, but we'll continue with them.
What is, Professor Munzale, just be on standby. Let's the Honorable Minister clarify this. What is the primary focus of the expected receipts from the GPE? Because you say you want to address the deepest gaps. Are you looking at the deepest gaps in tertiary education, deepest gaps in secondary education, or deepest gaps in primary education?
We will address the deepest gaps in the basic education level first, because we already have a scheme around the tertiary education level. For instance, like I just informed you, the kind of funding requirement we have for TED Fund. There's a proposition, part of what we are engaging is for the National Assembly to agree for a higher percentage of, instead of 2%, to go to maybe 3%. or 4%, as the case may be. Many countries have moved higher than that. There are also propositions, there are a lot of things to do around tertiary education. At tertiary education level, the funding for it. Where the problem is deepest is with school enrollment. Children, the number of out-of-school children in Nigeria put nearly at 13 million or 10 points. Based on the work we've done in the past 6 years, we've reduced some of the numbers, but there's still a lot of out-of-school children. In Nigeria, you can notice we have the nomadic education program in the commission, we have the adult literacy commission, we have, in the Ministry of Education, we have all these commissions dealing with this problem. This has been endemic to Nigeria almost, and therefore we must address them. So primarily, these sums must go to states like Adamawa, Katsina, where we have the deepest gaps. Some parts of your states even, where you will think you wouldn't have these numbers. You find numbers. In the riverine communities, for instance, I was amazed that when I went to launch BESDA in River State, for instance. And in River State, it was alleged that people don't want to go to school because of cultism, for instance. So there are issues around, in fact, some of the traditional rulers in River State allowed their own city rooms to become schools so that people can go to school. So there are all sorts of engagements going around the country, and everywhere that we've gone, we want to be able to address those gaps. Those are the first things, because those are the building blocks to whatever you're going to be building in Nigeria.
All right, Honorable Minister, we will return to you in the course of the program for other clarifications. Now, Professor Unzali Jibrin, you've listened to the Honorable Minister for a while now, doing some explanations on the significance of Nigeria's participation at the Global Educational Summit. To you, what are the key takeaways from this summit?
Thank you very much. Well, I think the global attention that has been focused on education will help Nigeria, because this is what some of us in the sector have been advocating for years, that we need to fund education better, that we need to also tie the output to the needs of the economy, not just produce people, but produce to satisfy the skill gaps in the economy. So I think the fact that Nigeria has now joined this partnership will help to galvanize the government, and given the commitment that the President has already made, I think we are looking forward to the transformation of education in the next 5 years, because he is committed to raising the percentage, not percentage of the budget per se, but the percentage that now goes to education, which is, by our calculation, is about 7%. It will now go to 50% of that within 2 years, and up to 100% within 5 years. I think this is fantastic. Talking about education in the states, when you look at the budgetary allocation, in some states you have up to 40% or even more. But I'm sorry to say that the governors are not interested, many of them are not interested in the actual outcomes. What they spend money on is procurement for obvious reasons. But things like teacher development, teacher welfare, and other things that are important inputs into education, they don't pay much attention to. So, I mean, you award contracts for the building of classrooms or for the procurement of furniture and things like that. It doesn't have any impact on education. Sometimes for years, the equipment purchased is locked up somewhere in a store and is never used. And nobody cares, because the whole idea was to simply go through the procurement process and not really to impact on education. Thank you.
Professor Munzali, there's something that we should address in this conversation. Just as well now that we're expecting some receipts from the Global Partnership for Education. But as the minister himself pointed out, there are pre-existing programs in the country, pre-existing agencies of government in the country. Have we done sufficient evaluation as to how effective these agencies of government have been? Some years ago, we were talking about our Nigerian education. We talked about nomadic education that was established as a commission under the Babangida administration, Adult Literacy Commission. Occasionally, we've had the heads of these agencies here with us in the studios to discuss this, and you're just asking yourself, if all of these agencies were active and delivering on results, such as we're talking about outcomes now, why are we still just grappling with 10 million, sometimes 13 million out-of-school children?
Mm-hmm. Well, I should say that Nigeria should be commended for its innovative approach to education. A lot of these agencies that we have do not exist in other countries, and many developing countries actually come to Nigeria to understudy some of these agencies and replicate them in their own countries. So I am optimistic that if a study were to be conducted of the impact of these commissions and parastatals, which are designed to address specific issues in education, it would be found that the impact has been positive. So I believe that it's not a waste of resources, and the fact that we still have problems in education does not mean that those agencies have failed. Well, as you know, you solve one problem, others surface. So you know you keep solving problems as new ones come up. The issue of out-of-school children is a very complex matter. Of course, there is resistance to Western education in certain parts of the country. Also, parents who are farmers would rather have the children help them on the farms than let them go to school. And the fact that we also have millions of unemployed people who are educated up to secondary school level or polytechnic level or even university level, discourages others from aspiring to acquire education, because what's the point in acquiring education if at the end of your studies you will be carrying your certificate about for 5 years without a job? Because the employment situation is very, very dire, and something needs to be done to create a very strong linkage between what the educational system produces and what the labor market requires. So the problem of out-of-school children cannot be linked to the failure or success of these parastatals, because it's a separate problem, but it can be addressed if we are serious about it. Thank you.
Prof, I'm not coming to you, but I just want to make some comments from what you have just said. The question Kingsley asks is very apt, because you can have parastatals over the years. They are not making impact. If these parastatals are making impact, we won't have as much as out-of-school children that we're talking about. We had nomadic education. Babangida's regime is over nearly 30 years ago. We also had, during the Jonathan administration, the Alimajari school system, which of course I'm not sure that some of them are even functional. He built some infrastructure for that in so many northern parts of the country, but I'm not sure the current governors in those states are keen into that. So that is why we keep having, children that are out of school. We'll return to that, but the comment is apt here, because there's a reason why we are where we are, educational. There's an obvious reason why we are where we are. If all these policies are functional and effective and result-oriented, we won't be talking about it here. All right, let's go to Femi Adesina, who he is not in the sector, but he can as well make an assessment of President's gains, from this summit. How would you assess, what Nigeria has been able to garner from this summit based on the value of our president globally?
Thank you. Just like the Honorable Minister of State for Education has said, the presence of our president tipped the scale in Nigeria's favor. GPE had extended some grants to Nigeria over the years 2012 to 2020. Then post-COVID, they did something. But the one that is coming our way now, $120 or $125 million, is the hugest we are having. And you can't divorce the president's presence at that summit from that. And of course, if African presidents were in a panel and Nigeria's president was not there, that panel would not be complete. You saw the president of Kenya, Ghana, Togo, Malawi, and Nigeria's presence in that panel made a lot of difference. So I believe that the president being there physically added a lot of value to that summit for Nigeria. And even the organizers, Prime Minister Boris Johnson and President Uhuru Kenyatta, appreciated the fact that President Buhari was there physically.
Thank you. But Femi, let me come back to the Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister, what is the primary focus of GPE? Because, you can address education from many perspectives. Does it purport, for instance, to tamper with, that's one word I can immediately borrow, or does it purport to help redefine or help reshape or help focus the philosophy of education of a particular country, or it seeks to ride on the philosophy of education already enunciated by a country and say, well, in achieving your goals, this is the way we are going to help you. Funding will come for you to get your infrastructure. Funding will come for you to boost school enrollment, deal with the supply side, deal with the demand side. What are we looking at? I don't know whether my question is clear.
Yeah, to a large extent, what you're asking is what does GPE actually portend for everybody? And it's different for everybody. And just like you said, truth be told, all of us appreciate, because all of us here are products of some sort of education. Without education, you can neither participate nor engage the development indices of the current world properly. That's key. So, and I like the way the Humanitarian Affairs Minister put it in one memo she sent to the President. She said, the minimum anybody needs to participate in the current development effort is the ability to be numerate and literate. And that is what the GPE wants to do. GPE is not about discussing whether your expertise is going to be in medicine or your expertise is now going to be in. What the Global Partnership for Education seeks to address is that engagement that brings everybody into a global educated minimum. A global educated minimum. So that everybody is now free to explore knowledge. Oftentimes people make a joke about people who have dropped out of school who made money. And I say, of course, the first thing about dropping out of school is that you're actually in school. You have to be in it to have dropped out. They're not talking about people who didn't go at all. For you to drop out, I personally, I can classify myself as a school dropout because I may be pursuing another PhD and halfway I dropped out. I say I've dropped out from school. If you can drop out at any level. But the important thing is that you have enough knowledge to engage the system. Engage the system at your means. So we all have an obligation as a country. Me as a person would like to see every Nigerian child given the ability to be numerate and literate and to be able to engage this modern economy. I've seen young people who bring you things that they put together and they say, oh, this guy has invented something. This is beautiful. First of all, the person needs to understand what it is that he is even doing. So somebody can have all the talent in the world. But if you're literate, you can be a better sweeper than you were when you were not. If you can count, you've heard the example people often give of boys in the market, and they say, Okechukwu went to school, they told him that 40 plus 10 is 50. And he said, what is 40 for, excuse me, what is 40 for plus 10, that is 50? The father said, 40 naira plus 10 naira is 50 naira. He said, hey, that's what you should have said. So education is everything. It defines who you are, and that is what GP is trying to do. GP is saying, let us have a global community where no one is left behind. Let us provide you the resources with which you can meet. That's why I said, for instance, in Nigeria, if we get this money, we don't carry this money and start going to build one new hostel in University of Lagos. That's not what our challenge is. Or take it because you're from Imo State, you go and begin to building new hostel in Lagos, Imo State. The idea, there's a problem in the country, and our problems must be addressed by what we get.
Yeah, there are problems in the country, in the education sector.
Sure.
And that's why...
So I'm going to address the ones that are so dire. That's why I said the deepest gaps.
That's right. That's why I want to amplify the point that my colleague amplified also earlier with regard to the question I posed to Professor Munzale. Namely, the effectiveness of pre-existing agencies and institutions of government dealing with education. The Amajiri program was there. I hear little of it these days. The nomadic education, it's there. Adult literacy is there. And you have all kinds of... UBEC has tried in recent years because now you are having, as we understand, more states, if not all the states, paying their counterpart funding. But these pre-existing ones, where is the failure gap that is creating this depth? Is it that there is less or little exploitation of culture as a means, because education is part of culture? Is it that there's less of the adaptation of our cultural norms to ensure that persons who are resistant to education get pulled out of it? We all recall here, in years past, women were not being sent to school. They said after a while, once you hit puberty, go and marry. After a while, they say, okay, even if you went to school, they will get to primary school or secondary school. Then after primary school, in some cases, they say, okay, go and learn what they call sewing, the one that is now fashion designing. After secondary school, so if you are going to secondary school, go to commercial secondary school, so you become a secretary. But today, you are seeing women in all the professions. So is it that these pre-existing institutions, because if you say that this money is coming and it's going to be targeted or a whole of government approach, how do we focus the resources that are coming on the particular agencies so that they can tweak their approaches? It appears from what we are seeing that the current approaches that they are adopting are not helping us tackle the problems.
And even the UBEC we talked about, with so many states did not pay their counterpart funding for a very long time.
That's correct.
Many of them did not pay. So invariably, Honorable Minister, as well coming here.
Okay, you've heard Professor Munzale say something. He started with some of the thinking at the subnational level, where people concentrate some of their procurement, for instance. Some of these agencies have some constraint around how they've operated over the years. In the last 6 years, you know, when we say Buhari's government is the most serious government we've had in many, many years, people think maybe we're just hyping the government. But seriousness is a thing of the mind. You must take something seriously for it to impact. You see, what you have described about all these agencies and their and what they are limited, what they have achieved, or the limitations of what they have achieved, they've done the bit they can. A lot of them have done well. A lot of them have. I'm not saying they can't do better. Of course, they can do better. Everybody can do better. There's nothing that is so good that it can be bettered. But the truth is that Nigerians themselves must come to this attitudinal change that you've just mentioned. I mean, we're the same ones who changed their mind about what women, like you just pointed out. And that's the same thing that must come to bear here. And that's that encouragement and this engagement. It is our job. People, a lot of people say, how come you're always all the time running around? I say, but I accept that this is the job that have been called to do for Nigeria at this time. It is our job to continuously engage governors and always, almost always, tell them what we think we should all be driving towards. And I'm encouraged because they are doing that. The parastatals and other ministers, I've given you, this is the first, our government is a progressive social democratic party. We're social democrats. It's a shift. Nigeria has only just joined the social democratic norm in the last 6 years. We've always stayed conservative.
Are you changing the name of APC to SDP?
No, it's not. No, I'm saying
it's a social democratic party.
This party is a congress. Our party is a congress. It's a congress of all who are progressives in Nigeria. Anybody who is a progressive, whether you were in Action Congress, CPC, APP, we gathered everybody who is progressive in their thought and say, please, we have now set up a congress where everybody can come. And that's where we are now. All of us are now in one basket. And you can see the impact. It changes Nigeria immediately. We started with direct school feeding programs. We've started with cash transfers. This thing you're talking about, people who refuse to send their children to school. We went straight to those parents and said, we will take your children and put them in school and pay you 5,000 naira for you to, that hawking that child used to do. That's what the cash transfer scheme is. We are the ones who are doing this. Everything, we're social democrats. We're social democrats in our party. That's our thinking. That's what the president had been talking about. Even when I was a member of the National Assembly in 1999, I kept insisting on these social democratic norms as a way of bringing development to the people. And that is exactly what we translated into in this party, and that's what we're executing. That is why we do not apologize for this strength. So in these 6 years, we have altered how Nigerians participate. We're not leaving it up to you. We're not even leaving it up to your cultural practices. I'm almost when I went to see the Emir of Kazare, I wanted to see what his district head had given him as reports, why schools were not participating in this area. And as educated as he is, he brought out everything. This is the fair engagement. It's the same thing with how we are now doing teacher registration. We want to know, we're not examining it. We just come into our classes. This is the federal government that says, if you are not qualified, you can't teach. This is the first government that said cut-off date, we gave it. Teachers Registration Council, people never heard that there was an establishment like that before. Suddenly, Professor Jiboye came in. The new mandate is get everybody regulated and make sure that those who are teaching our schools are people who can afford it. So it's a mindset. We are working hard. It is very, very difficult. Every day I see the resistance. It's not easy to confront cultures. I've visited almost half of the Almajiri schools. We built 156. The concept of building the Almajiri schools was a bit misplaced at the time because, like I said, Professor Monzali has also alluded to it. The idea was to build things. If you notice what Ogafemi Adesina just said now, he said the presence of the president, it alters how people think because they know that he's not a flimsy president. He's a serious person, and that presence is what is happening now. Most of the things that have changed. I went to Bauchi and we pleaded with him, Sheikh, to please take over one of the schools because the schools were abandoned. They exist in Gombe. I met with the governor, very urbane, very calculated governor that they have now, and he said, "Okay, permit me to turn one of them into a teacher training place because we have lack of teachers." I said, "Please go ahead, sir." This is the sort of engagement we want. We don't want to build buildings for the fun of it. And that's why I'm saying I'm encouraged because the kind of response we've gotten, there's an attitudinal change. And almost all of us who are, because if people come to this social democratic awakening, if you come to a progressive thinking that this is not all about you, it is about the Nigerian child, the Nigerian public, that guy who, you can't be your Mercedes Jeep wagon, and then the trailer on top of Ojuelegba falls on top of it and you're dead. You're dead. The driver who is driving the motor did not go to school. He doesn't know that a double sign on the road does not mean two snakes. It means no bend, double bend. He needs to know. So if you don't want everybody engaged, don't think this education we're talking about is about one minister or one this. We are talking about educating Nigerians for the purposes of the manpower that
right.
Nigeria needs to drive its plane.
And that's at the federal, that's at the federal level.
Yes. And there's something you said at the incipient of this conversation, which says that federal government does not own any primary school. You know, that basically thousands of them that you mentioned are owned, are domiciled in the states. But today, if you talk about those who are owed salaries in this country, they're the teachers. They're the teachers. Almost in every state, I stand to be corrected. Most teachers are old, especially primary school level. And someone who is imparting knowledge on the younger generation of Nigerians, which is your target, is not paid salaries. Some of them are also engaged in private businesses to make ends meet. So it's also affecting education. Let me come to Professor Monsali once more. It appears that we've lost touch with technical education in the country. We keep churning out unemployable graduates in this country, unskillful graduates in this country. With respect to the GP that we're talking about, do you think that it will be necessary to channel part of this money towards technical education so that we can now begin to produce graduates that are employable, graduates that are skillful, that can be engaged in different aspects of the national economy?
Yes, yes, indeed. Actually, this, if we embark on the reform of our education, this is a key factor that we must address. For development, we really need to equip people with skills. TVET, that is Technical and Vocational Education and Training, is crucial, is critical. Taiwan, for example, does not emphasize paper qualifications. A lot of the industrial products that we consume from Taiwan and from the Asian tigers generally are produced in small cottage industries in the boys' quarters of houses belonging to people, you know, not in big factories, but the people have the skills. The German education system, which many people visit Germany to understudy, is a wonderful one, because you see, the people we call engineers at Julius Berger, they're just people who had junior secondary school education plus 4 more years instead of 3 more years for the senior secondary school. But there is a lot of practical training. They spend 3 days at school, 2 days attached to an industry that is related to the skill that they wish to acquire. But it is a model that cannot be transplanted from Germany because of the social democratic nature of Germans. The industry that the trainee is attached to pays some remuneration. The state government also contributes. The federal government also contributes. This cannot happen in other countries. Even, you know, the German banking system is not based on just making profit. Banking is seen as a social enterprise to contribute to development. So they charge the minimum interest rate. It's just like maybe a service charge. So the other Western capitalist countries cannot operate that kind of system. But what we can take from the German system is a mixture of practical and theoretical knowledge. So you see, after only 7 years post-primary education, the German boy or girl is ready to go into industry as an expert. So if you go into the building industry, for example, you specialize in, say, flyovers. And you may not be able to build a house, but you will be an expert in building flyovers. Or you might specialize in just doing POP. Or if you go into carpentry, you might specialize in making doors only. So you would be certified as a craftsman. And after maybe 10 years of experience, you can become a master craftsman, which means you can certify other craftsmen. So you see, they don't really have even polytechnic diplomas. They don't have degrees. But look at their their output. Look at their performance. We all know when they say Julius Berger is handling a project, you can be rest assured that it will be qualitative. So I think there is a lot for us to learn from those countries. And even in universities now, they are introducing entrepreneurship. And some of the universities are also tilting their program, their degrees to be vocational. I mean, if I was to set up a new university, I would say, what am I doing with BSc Sociology, BA English, you know, or BA English and Arabic, which was what I studied. You know, because what am I trained to do at the end of that? Because the old thinking used to be that even if you studied classics, you could then use it as a launch pad to go and become, you know, a chartered accountant, for example. But not anymore. And now, you see, we need to educate people for a vocation. So I would say, instead of BSc Sociology, sorry, let's produce somebody who has a BSc Social Work or BSc Criminology, for example. So I think we should be moving towards applied sciences, whether social or pure sciences. But to produce people with a pure degree in chemistry, for example, I mean, what are you then trained to do? We can't afford it as a developing country to keep producing people who just have theoretical knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you very much. But I'm sure you have raised some controversial points. Those who are watching at home will say, look, if we have a feedback opportunity. We used to use a Twitter handle before the hammer fell on Twitter. We have a Facebook account, so you can respond to what Professor Muzali is saying, but his points are noted. One other issue, just before we go on this short break, I'm sure that we have all heard this joke. It's been circulating in the course of the last couple of weeks about how Nigerian parents put their children into a pressure cooker of learning. By the time a child is 1 year old, the parents want to get rid of that child, send a child to a creche. So the child starts struggling to acquire numeracy and literacy. 2, 3 years, the child nursery, all kinds of everything is reading. The child comes back, goes to school in the morning, comes back in the evening, manages to sleep for a few hours, and then goes back again to school. Now that schools are supposed to be on holidays, they are also sending them back to summer school to go and be reading the same things that they have been reading. And at the end of the day, when they come out of high school, come out of universities, you are looking for vocational skills, and there's a problem. All right, it's Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We'll take a short break now, and when we return, we'll continue with the conversation. All right, you're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Of course, we still have all our guests with us in the studios. I was just wondering, back again to Professor Muzali Jibrin, you know, the aspects that you raised about what is happening at the subnational level in a number of the cases where the interest appears to be more, in some cases, about procurement. How might that narrative be changed? Because we do know that, I mean, persons get appointed into education portfolios and everybody say, wow, that's a juicy ministry. You get appointed to SUBEB, which is the State Universal Basic Education Board. Everybody say, wow, you know, that's a juicy. And the wow that we'll be hearing about those things relate now to the numbers of out-of-school children and the deep gaps that we are still struggling to close in our educational system. How do we alter this narrative?
Yeah, well, you see, if the problem was with the commissioners for education and the chairman of SUBEB, it would be easy to solve. But it is sad to say that the problem is really with the governors. Many of them are not serious about education or even other social development projects. All they're interested in is primitive accumulation. And this goes back to one of the key focal points of this administration, which is fighting corruption. I think we need to go down to the state level to ensure that we create mechanisms to improve accountability and to reduce the waste of public funds. Because you see, now the governors, are the beginning and the end, the alpha and the omega in everything. We have the constitution makers who are very wise. They created mechanisms for the control of the enormous powers given to the executive, both at the center and in the states. But you see, because of corruption, the state assembly members who are supposed to be the bosses of the governors, and who are supposed to check them and call them to order, they are all in the pockets of the governors. And all the democratic provisions in the Constitution are just bypassed or made a mockery of because the members have been compromised. They are in no position to check the excesses of the governors. So I think we need to address that issue from that end. And also, the anti-corruption agencies ought to do more in monitoring what is happening in the states and how assets are being acquired or money is being laundered and so on, so that the corruption would be minimized and the citizens would be getting more value for their money.
Well, all right. Thank you, Prof. Let's return to Femi Adesina. I hope this question will be drifting, but it's all part of what we are discussing. Kidnapping of students in Nigeria. It has become I don't know. Now we've lost count of how many students that are in the den of kidnappers, mostly in north central Nigeria. This is also affecting education. How is the government actually addressing this matter?
Thank you. I believe that kidnapping in our schools cannot be treated in isolation. It has to be considered within the larger framework of insecurity. Because if you decide to tackle kidnapping in schools and the larger insecurity is there, it will not work. So it is within that big basket of insecurity. Tackle the insecurity in the country decisively, and then you will have safer schools. So we know that this government has done a lot to tackle the insecurity situation. But it's not done till it's done. And I believe that in not too long a time from now, we will get there. When we have a safer country, we will also have safer schools.
Now, the GP you are talking about, is it, do you think it's necessary, to use some of the funds accruable from that to also address security in schools? Because if we're talking about child education, if we're talking about enrollment in school, these are schools and these are children. And if they're not safe, how can they study? That's just part of the reason why I raised the question.
Yes, but that the funds that GPE will advance, I'm not sure should be directed at securing schools. Rather, it is to give opportunities. It is the duty of government to secure the country. In fact, it's in our constitution, and government is working at that. We have security issues, we have security problems. They are being tackled, but eventually we will get out of it. And like I said earlier, when the country is better secured, our schools will also be better secured.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Femi Adesina. Honorable Minister of State Education, I was just wondering, was there or were there any state governors on the president's entourage? Assuming there was none, was there anything that might have been lost in terms of being present and then being part of the ambience and appreciating the core essence of what is afoot, the whole idea of the intervention by the GP and what we need to do in realizing what you refer to as a total government approach to boosting our educational fortunes.
Well, just to say, at every point, any Nigerian is welcome to be part of what we are doing or what the president is doing, because we're serving everybody, governors inclusive. But at this particular event, governors were not invited because this was, the global partnership is at country level. You know, when people keep going back to why we kept insisting that, please, Mr. President, come, we didn't want to water down our participation. I met with other ministers at the ministerial level, but once we welcomed my own president, I could talk with a little bit more power, because the presidents that didn't come, or the ones that who came in, who phoned in, also, I know what transfer. You know, this is an international organization, and at your level, you put your best foot forward, and that is how this must be engaged. It's not. There's nothing we've missed by not having either people represent states or governors come in, because everything we've done, we've actually done it on their behalf. Because Nigeria is a unique federation. This is a federation that serves states. Normally, states serve the federal republic, but here, the federal government gets a national consolidated revenue and then disburses it to the states. So so we are working for them. The good thing is that the governors are also responsive. They are also happy. They are working. They asked actually for us to suspend the need for them to put up their own counterpart funding, and we said no. The idea behind the counterpart funding is for us to know that this state is doing what it ought to do for the federal government to give this 2% of its revenue. And this is what that engagement is about. And this is what GPE is about. And just to dovetail into the question my brother Ogafemi did respond to about safe schools. You can't divorce all of them. We're not going to be spending GPE money for safe schools. There's already a safe school fund already, which Minister of Finance, Madam Zainab, and the Gordon Brown Foundation had already, this existed even before this government, because and like Ogafemi had pointed out, see, insecurity, from when Boko Haram started, that was what led, it was the presence of Boko Haram that led to Chibok. Nobody just simply went to Chibok to take girls. It was in the context of Boko Haram. It is also in that context you look at what we are seeing now, whether it's with our school at Birni Yauri, or in Kagara, or in Jengebe. Because if you look at what happened in Jengebe near Zamfara, it's just the same. It's the same trajectory of the bandits that were on that territory at the time that took the school at Jengebe, and they left. By the time, if you look at what is happening in Tegina, it is the same trajectory around those who are the bandits in that area. In Kagara, in Niger State, in Katsina, when we had the boys taken, all of that, you look at them, there must be pockets of the bandits around that area to be able to execute that. That is what Kaduna is suffering from now, because when they came for the boys, students at the School of Forestry, that escalated this, and it is from there, from paying small, they got more money to take the people in Bethel before they took the ones that they were in the university, before they took the ones in the polytechnic. So Usman, so our idea, and when you hear that we are saying no to paying bandits, is because they have nothing else to do with the money. Any money you pay them, they can only increase their empire. So, like he said, you must look at the country holistically. The government is tackling, the federal government is dealing with each of these so that you can then be able to translate the little ones at the primary school level. We engage, in the conference we met with all the service chiefs, the new service chiefs, because the president reorganized his security architecture and giving them time, like he has pointed out, for each of them to engage in what they need to do. And then we met with them. We sat down with them, we looked at it, and the governors themselves made inputs. Governors are now using trigger mechanisms. Governors are now doing security audit for each of their schools. Governors are, the response in Sokoto is not the same, must not be the same way in Kaduna. The response in Niger is not the same response, because they're all specific. Everybody, there are some things they checked. For instance, what is the response time between one school and where the military are? How long does it take to move people so that they know? Because you see, the military cannot react the same way if they see a group of bandits and they start shooting at them when they have no children. They won't do that when they have the children already. They won't. We just recovered, and I keep thanking the military because they go on song in so many ways. The work they do. Today they've recovered 2 of our children from yesterday. So they are constantly at risk. Themselves they understand that this is a national challenge, and they're doing it.
All right, Honourable Minister, I hope we'll have time in due course actually to look at these safe schools as a whole topic, so we can dissect all aspects of that. Before we go, because of course time is no longer on our side, the question currently asked with respect to whether governors attended that summit is very necessary, because here Prof has alluded to the fact that many state governors are not showing enough interest in the education sector. 1, based on the budget for education. 2, keying into federal government policies on education. 3, ensuring that enrollment of pupils in school is encouraged in their schools. 4, many teachers are being owed across the states of the Federation. I wonder the kind of education we're going to get when teachers are not paid. Now, what are the mechanisms put in place to determine states that are serious, states that should benefit from this GP fund that we're talking about? Because if you give a state fund from that and the state is not using it for the purpose it was meant, then of course all the efforts should have been in vain.
Thank you very much. I didn't say states are not going to be looked into. I said going to the GP was actually not meant for state governors at the time. Not that we are representing all of them. But your point is well taken. The state governors, I hear Professor Muzel, I hear many Nigerians who are not really very happy with how the states conduct their affairs. All I plead is that we are social, again, we're in a democratic setting. We can't militarily deal with state governors. We engage them. And that is what I have been doing. And that's what we do. In fact, the National Economic Council meets as often as it can under the chairmanship of the Vice President. And the Vice President, is a very diplomatic and very seasoned lawyer. There is nothing about this that he does not understand. And he has managed to steer them, all of them together, and they are doing well. But like I pointed out, all of them are not running at the same speed. And I don't think all of them can run at the same speed. What we need to do, and what we are doing, is to engage them. And we are doing that. And I'm just giving you instances of going around each of them. There are states where they have serious issues. For instance, local governments paying. When I met with the governor of Nasarawa, for instance, he has this best intention to pay everybody and everything. But you see, some of the local governments, Doma, people are far from, some of them, it is what he gets from the field that he will pay. He might not know every teacher in each of the local governments. And these local governments are by right the owners of the schools we call the LEAs, local area, the way it's the nomenclature reads. It is the same thing here in FCT. Once you leave this whole area and you go into some parts, you'll be wondering, these are schools? So it is an engagement that must be continuous. We believe that governors are doing the most they can, but my job is to encourage them, and I keep rallying around them to make sure that they're doing that.
Okay, Honorable Minister of State, thank you very much, and we hope that encouragement will also relate to changing the narrative with regard to the focus of the budgets for education in some of the states that tend to be more now relating to, as Professor Munzali said, almost unuseful procurement purposes. So on that note, we'd like to appreciate all our three guests who have been with us on the program this morning. We'd like to thank Mr. Femi Adesina, Special Advisor to the President on Media and Publicity. Thank you very much for being part of the conversation this morning. We also would like to appreciate Professor Munzali Jibrin, former Executive Secretary, National Universities Commission. Thank you very much for being here on Good Morning Nigeria. And of course, deep thanks to the Honorable Minister of State Education, that's Chukwuemeka Onwajiuba. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister.
Thank you.
All right. It's Good Morning Nigeria, but of course, it's still the Olympic season, so let's go over to our sports desk.